Hello and welcome to season 2 of Creative Dirt. This is a podcast and community all about learning how to live a more creative life. I'm your host, Honor Tarantigue, and I really found that professional artists have a lot of space to be weird and fun and creative and just explore what their talents are. But people who are not professional artists are sometimes just put in the box of being consumers. And that's not very fun because normal people can be creative too. I wanted to find a community of people trying to be artistic, but not necessarily being perfect at it. And I didn't find that. And so enter Creative Dirt. I really started this podcast because I believe that everyone deserves to experience the joy of a creative life. So I think we are definitely in a point in society right now where people are stressed. People are anxious. I get stressed and anxious like a lot. It's been said that Gen Z is the most depressed generation ever in recorded history of like psychology. And I totally get it. There's literally a bombardment of terrible news all the time. Uh, Kind of not a lot of hope going on around. Like, that sucks. And with social media, there's obviously, as we all know, so much comparison going on online, and it's really hard to get away from seeing what your life is supposed to look like. And it's really tough for a lot of people. And I know mental health is like a huge, like, hot topic. We all want to talk about it, but the way society addresses it is like just talking about it, not really actually addressing it. Oh yeah, and not to mention we're still processing like the trauma from COVID-19. Yeah. So this season on Creative Dirt, we're going to be exploring the cross between mental health and creativity. Specifically, we're going to be looking into how taking care of ourselves, mind, body, and spirit makes us more creative, and how to engage in self-care in a way that is authentic to who we are and really filling our cup. Personally, I really have struggled with like the whole concept of self-care. Firstly, there's kind of that connotation that self-care is like very self-indulgent. Like, I feel like if you were to ask like a person of the older generation, like, oh, what do you do for self-care? Or if you were to say, I'm going to go do X, Y, and Z for self-care, like, you would totally get an eye roll. And sometimes I've like internalized a little bit of that mindset to feel like self-care is like cringy. And secondly, I also don't really like admitting that I need self-care. I feel like if I were to say like at work, like, oh, I'm going to take a mental health day, I feel like I would kind of come across as like weak or like feeble or like needing to like take a minute, and that's not very cool. And then when you look online, a lot of self-care is definitely driven by consumerism. It's like, buy this cream and you will experience the brink of self-care, or buy this, that, buy this. And it really presents the image that self-care is found in products, and that's not true. And it kind of makes me feel really exhausted to think about like what products I have to sift through to get the right self-care. So like, do I need the brightening mask or the hydrating one? And should I get the lavender bath salts or the eucalyptus ones? It's a lot to think through, and there's a lot of choices to make. And it seems like self-care is just like super trendy, and you need to be on top of like the best things to do. And there's always something, right? It gets really exhausting trying to keep up with everything. And most of the stuff we don't even need. And unfortunately, too, it really presents the idea that people of a higher socioeconomic status deserve better self-care. And that's just messed up. That's not right. But ultimately, if I'm honest, the reason why I've really struggled with self-care the most is because I feel like it kind of doesn't really like work for me. Ultimately, it's temporary, and there's always something, knocking at your door to make you more stressed out. You can do all the self-care in the world that you want. There's going to be some bad news you're going to get. You're going to have a bad day. Somebody might say something to you that makes you feel crappy. So, needless to say, I've had a hard time with self-care. And so we can know that self-care doesn't make our problems go away, but it is an extremely healthy coping mechanism in terms of dealing with a lot of the issues that you are facing. Because there's a lot of unhealthy ways to engage in self-care as well. Now, that doesn't sound overindulgent to me. Okay. So that is why this season I want us to approach self-care from a different lens And I'm thinking more of a creative lens. I want us to think about self-care in a way that is really like rejuvenating us and really filling our cup. And how do we take the time to really enjoy it and be mindful about it and really just do it in a way that makes us feel even more like ourselves? A lot of times when I've had conversations with folks on the podcast, I ask them why they create, and they say, well, it makes me feel more like myself. And isn't that what self-care is all about? Getting in touch with who we are, feeling less stressed, and just spending time with ourselves and being at home in our own body. And so, some of the self care methods that we're going to talk about on this season are so exciting. I have an amazing lineup of guests this season. We're going to talk about self care in the form of forest therapy. We'll talk about music therapy and designing your space. We're going to talk about songwriting and just regular writing, journaling, and retail therapy. Of course, that's also a form of therapy, just to name a few. Self care should make us feel recharged and really in touch with who we are. So join me on this journey as we explore how to make self-care more creative, fulfilling, and authentic, and find out how to really make it an act of self-love. Don't forget, I'm rooting for you, and I'll see you in the next few episodes. If you like this podcast, please give us a 5-star rating wherever you're listening. That really helps us grow the podcast, and we appreciate all your support. And by we, I mean me. Yes, just myself.